So right here, I have a simple setup. I have a potentiometer. I have some LEDs. Inside this void loop right now, I'm going to write a spot to save a value of my analog read, my potentiometer, something like that. So I'm starting to get some things set up. I could make this a little bit more efficient. Right now it doesn't do a whole lot. I don't have any of the LEDs turning on. I don't have any if statements or anything like that. But what I have right now is I have some functions that I'm using. Pin mode is a function. I know that it's a function because it does something. It has a name, it has parentheses, and inside those parentheses, I have inputs. Analog read is a function. It has a name, it has parentheses, and it has inside the parentheses some inputs. I can put delay in. Delay is a function. It does something, and I call it with a name. And I have parentheses, and I can put inputs in there. I can turn on a light. Can't spell today. Digital write. Let's see, LED in green. Hi. Digital write is also a function. I call it with a name. Inside parentheses, I have some inputs. These inputs can change. And that's an important part of functions, is making them versatile. It wouldn't be very good to have a function that can just do one very specific thing. I want them to be pretty broad, but also give them the ability to manipulate them to make them more specific as I need to. This is very specific. I'm turning on a very specific spot with voltage. Well, in this case, I'm turning off. I'm stop setting voltage to pin 11. It's very specific. If it was just digital write in general, it was, well, do I send voltage or do I not? And which pin do I use? I have to be specific in here to let it know what's happening. So these are a lot of the functions that we've used already. There are some other ones. What I want to do is I want to write our own function. So right now, let's go ahead and just say, if I wanted to blink this LED, how would I do this? I'd turn it on. I'd wait. And I'd do it over again, except for this time I'd turn it off. Same code, except for I turn this off. Turn on, wait, turn off, wait. It is taking this reading, and right now the reading's not doing anything. If I wanted to, I could change this like that. Let's be a little bit more clean here. Byte. Pin equals 0. All right. So what I have here is I have two LEDs that I've made space for to name them. I've made sure that they're outputs. I have a spot for my analog pin, and then I read my analog pin and save it in a spot called val. I then turn on my blue LED. I wait for whatever time my potentiometer tells me to. I then turn it off and wait for whatever time my potentiometer tells me to. So right now it looks like it's on always because this is going to be really, really small. But as I turn this up, we can see that it blinks slower and slower until I get just over a second blink. Remember, when my potentiometer is open all the way, the value is 1023. That would be my delay value there. Okay, so this is fine. But what do I do if I want to blink my other LED, my green one? Well, I would have to take these 4 lines of code. I'd have to take these 4 lines of code, and I need to have to write them again. And you know, 3 lines of code, 4 lines of code, it's not that big of a deal. But when I start doing things with repetition, it would be nice to not have to do so much over and over again. Maybe build a template, build something to where I don't have to quite do it so much. And sometimes you want to do something that might be dozens of lines of code, or maybe hundreds of lines of code, and you don't want to have to keep redoing that over and over again. Maybe I want a slightly different value in here to blink it at. So there's lots of things that I might want to do. And so right now we can see that, well, now there's 2 blinking. But you can see that every time I want to blink an LED, I'm going to have to write a lot of code. And I don't necessarily want to do that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the basics of what I'm doing here, and I'm going to go global. I like to put my functions at the bottom. It doesn't really matter as long as they're global. First thing I want to do is I need to give my function a data type. To figure out what data type to use, you need to know what size of data you're going to be storing, and in this case I'm blinking an LED. There is no need for storage. It's just doing something. I'm not saving a value. So in this case, it's void. There is no space needed to do this. The number 2 thing I need to do is give it a name. It follows the same naming convention of variables. In this case, I'm just going to call mine flash. We could call it blink. We could call it whatever you want to call it. I'll call mine flash from now on. And to make sure that we know that it is a function, this looks like a variable. This looks like a function. I don't want to put my semicolon here because the semicolon says that I am now done with my function. I don't want to be done with my function. I want to tell it what I want my function to do. What do I want my function to do? I want it to do this stuff. So I'm just going to write that exact same code, the exact same code that I would have written up here. I'm going to put inside of this scope. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to paste, forgot to move my cursor. I'm going to paste this in. Now this function isn't very nice. The reason why this function isn't very nice is because it's very specific. It's using a variable that is specific to this sketch, this whole sketch. And it's using variables that are local to this loop. It's not going to work. It's not going to work very well even if I change these values a little bit. What I want to do is I want to have a very generic function, something that's just going to blink any spot, any one of my digital pins, for any specific time that I dictate it to be. So what I want to do is I want to take out everything that could be changed. I could change this. That's my position. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out, anything that can be changed, and I have to put in a new variable, some type of placeholder, something to keep it in there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call this pin. We are using pin up here. It's not going to get confused because this is local to this loop, this will be local to this loop, but what I want to do is I just want to keep it completely generic. I'm going to call it LED because that's what I'm doing. I want to be able to turn on an LED, I want to turn off an LED. But how is it going to know which LED I'm referring to when I call my function flash? What I'm going to do is inside of these parentheses down here, remember that's where we put inputs in. I put an input here, an analog read. For pin mode, I have 2 inputs here. What we're going to do is we're going to say, well, I need an input. What input do you want to use? I want to use LED. What that means is when I call this up here, the input that I put in here will be passed into here. If I put the number 13 into here, this one instance of calling my flash function, the value of 13 will be put in for LED, meaning that it will flash LED 13. If I call this again and put a 5 in here, it'll have it do a 5. And if I change this to a 2, it'll flash the 2 pin, the number 2 LED. That's what this input's going to do here. What else can I change in here, though? Again, we want to make it very versatile. I could change this, my delay time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out, and I can call it whatever I want. Just to be simple right now, I'm just going to call this X. But anytime that I take out a specific variable like val or LED green, and I replace it with a more broad variable, it needs to be declared in my inputs. So now I have 2 inputs. The first input being where do we want to flash. The second input would be for how long. Just like the first input here is which pin do you want to set up, and the second one is do you want it to be an input or an output. Here we have which analog pin do you want to read? Right here. We have digital write. Send power to this pin. Now we wrote our own function. We want to flash something. And the very first thing that we want to do is we want to say which one do we want to flash. LED green, comma. And how long do we want this to flash for? Well, let's just put a 500 in for now. And then we're going to start. We'll see that the green one flashes for 500. I can change the potentiometer, and it's not going to change how fast my LED flashes. Why? Well, because I told it to plug a 500 in as my second input. This is my second input. So 500 gets put here, and 500 gets put here. If I want it to flash faster, I change this to 200. Now it's going to flash faster. If I want my flash speed to be connected to my analog sensor here, well, I just need to put that in my code. Instead of putting 200 in here, I will put my variable for my potentiometer reading. And so right now you might say, you know, that took longer to do. I could have just copied and pasted these 4 lines a couple times and changed what I needed, and that's true to a point. But the nice thing about a function is if you write a function and you write it well, it's generic. I could put this in any one of my sketches and it will work. Now I never, ever, ever have to write a function or I don't ever have to write these 4 lines ever again to blink an LED. Because if that's exactly what I want to do, I just have to copy and paste this into any other code that I want to do. I put it at the bottom. Now all I have to do is call it. And there we go. If I just keep a list of all the functions that I've written, I never ever have to solve this problem again. For the next 100 years, I've solved this problem and I don't have to do it again. It's being efficient. And the other nice thing is, once I know that this works, I've debugged it. I know that it works, and I don't have to worry about if I copy and paste something, did I change everything, did I miss something, maybe I misspelled something this time, maybe I forgot a semicolon, maybe I forgot something on here. I know that it works because I've checked it right now and everything in it works. I can call this multiple times, just like I can call delay multiple times with different inputs. And I can even change this val times 2. So twice the potentiometer reading. I could have flash green happen twice, or even 3 times, and then the blue one work. Now that I have everything written well, it makes life much easier. I can just put this in a for loop even, or I could put it in a for loop, a while loop, an if statement. If val equals a certain thing, flash the green light. If it equals something else, do the blue one. I can just drag and drop this entire block of code anywhere that I want it now.